lived his life in a big way, meeting many, many people, talking to many, many people, giving many, many lectures, seminars, teachings to people in India, to people in Britain, over decades, people in Hungary. So there's a huge breadth to Subhuti's vision and the way he's lived his life. And there's this quality also, very personable, very affirming quality. So when you spend time with Subhuti, one is affirmed, uplifted, and experiences a huge amount of enthusiasm. So I remember one time Subhuti came to visit. I had an art studio down the road, and he requested to come and visit my art studio and look at my artwork. So took time out from a visit like this, a presidential visit, to come and do that, and was just very encouraging, affirming of the paintings that I was making and my desire to follow this path, which really helped me make the next few decisions in my life. And people have experienced this, I know, because people relate this to me, that Subhuti takes them in and affirms and is enthusiastic and very, very positive in this friendship relation. So I just wanted to say that that's what many people have said about Subhuti, and that's been my own personal experience. And I'm delighted that he's here to say what he's got to say, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kusala. Sorry, that wasn't too bad. Okay. I could tell some stories, but I'm not going to. So, dear brothers and sisters, and of course, dear brothers and sisters on the other end of that camera, thank you for inviting me to be with you and to celebrate together the Buddha's enlightenment. I'm very aware that almost certainly some of my Indian brothers and sisters will be out there, and I'm sure I can speak for everybody here that our hearts are with them at this time. I'm in really regular contact with friends out there, and I lost another friend yesterday to COVID. And what we do here, I want to assure you, people in India, that people in our Sangha here in the UK are with you and thinking of you and concerned for you, and would like to help in whatever way they can. So we're all joining on this particular day, which is the anniversary of the most important event in history. Yeah? The most important event in history. Nothing could be more important than the Buddha's enlightenment. The first time in human history that an individual gained enlightenment. And we're quite familiar, really, with the basic story of what happened, as it were, well, symbolically, probably wasn't exactly corresponding to this day, but roughly corresponding to the full moon of Vaishakha, the Indian month of Vaishakha, which is May, June. I don't know when the actual full moon is, but it must be approximately this time. And we're familiar with the image of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, the tree above him, the leaves, those long heart-shaped leaves above him, thick trunk behind him, sitting on a heap of kusha grass, and something happened to him at that time, which was, according to the Buddhist perspective, the first time that it happened in human history. It had never happened before. And what happened is described by the Buddha himself in different ways. He talks about knowledge arising, light arising. So particularly striking, he uses the image of light. So the metaphor is of darkness, the darkness of ignorance, which is suddenly illumined and everything is seen plainly. So he talks about the hosts of Mara, the hosts of the worldly pull, worldly influence, being routed and standing like the sun, lighting up the sky. So something happened to him that is communicated through the metaphor of light arising in darkness. He also talked about it in other ways. He talked about it in terms of knowledge, but we don't know what he means by knowledge unless we start going into that. But the way I find most accessible, he talks in terms of his mind becoming deconditioned. This is my rephrasing of what he says. His mind becoming free from conditions. So in order to understand that, we need to understand in terms of our own experience what that actually means. Because what happened to the Buddha took him beyond our ordinary way of interpreting our experience, our ordinary way of relating to what is going on around us. So our experience, our awareness is all mixed up with the tendency to identify me, to find what we think is me, and therefore, correspondingly, what is not me. This is called ahankar. Aham in Pali means I. Kar is from a verb meaning to make. Karna, to make, in modern Indian languages, or to do. So it's that function within us that makes I. And it's completely automatic. It's just going on all the time in the background of consciousness. But as we're aware, as the world is coming into us through the senses, it is conscious to us, we're immediately bifurcating it into I and not I. The corresponding correlate of that is mamankar. Mamang means mine. So mamankar means mine making. So we're selecting I am this. That is mine. That is not mine. That is not me. And without any premeditation, without any realization, very often, until we become a little bit more aware and start to interrogate what's going on in awareness, we just do this, just automatically selecting what we think we are. I think I'm a human being. I think I'm an Englishman, etc., etc. Male. Well, of course, physically I'm male, but it's more than just identifying, it's actually possessing. It's taking hold of, grasping, and grasping with sometimes a sclerotic vigor that is, well, ultimately very hard to shake off indeed. So we're taking our conditioned experience, our experience of a world which is full of conditions operating upon each other, arising, passing away, and we're choosing from within this great fizzing, buzzing mass of conditions before us, we're choosing what we will hold to as I and what we will grasp onto as mine. So ahankar and mamankar could be better put as I grasping and mine grasping. It's an action of holding on to, gripping firmly. So when the Buddha speaks of becoming deconditioned, his mind becoming deconditioned, he means that his awareness just drops all that, just stops identifying as I or mine. It's difficult to get, isn't it? Because it's so automatic for us. We're just bound up with it. That is our world. The Buddha just stops it. And that doesn't mean he stops taking things in. It doesn't mean that he's not aware. It doesn't mean that conditioned things do not appear to him. But they appear to him without any grasping. And so hard to explain, or well, hard to realize what that is like. But what we're told, and I'm kind of paraphrasing a whole lot of discussion in Buddhist tradition, what that entails is, first of all, a tremendous relief, huge relief, because all that grasping is a source of tremendous tension within us, a constant, restless questing after a certainty within the conditioned flow that we just cannot find. It's like trying to find certainty by grasping hold of a river. You plunge your hands into it and say, this is me, and it's gone. Or trying to look at a cloud and say, that's my cloud. By the time you've identified a cloud, it's changed already. So our enterprise is doomed right from the start. Our enterprise of ahankar and mamankar, of grasping I, grasping mine, is hopeless. It can't be done. We can get a sort of an illusion of doing it for periods of time. For a little while, we think we've got it all together, and it just slips through our fingers, just like that, and it's damn painful. It hurts. And even the sense that the grasping is driven by a desire for certainty. So the grasping is already painful. The Buddha writes about this, or sings about this, in fact. I spoke about this exactly a year ago, at Vaishaka Purnima a year ago. He says that this house builder who's built this house of pain, and the house is this house that ahankar and mamankar creates, it's never going to be built again. I've seen the house builder, and I'm not going to carry on doing it. My mind's been deconditioned. So what a delight, what a relief. You're able to just watch things happening all around you with complete detachment, without any inner disturbance, without any turbulence. And all the natural qualities of mind, the natural qualities of awareness, are able to emerge. Awareness itself is naturally spacious. It's unbounded, unlimited. It's like the sky, it's often said. It's vast as the sky. Awareness itself is unlimited. It doesn't have boundaries to it. It's just open. And it's naturally wise. Awareness itself just sees. Wisdom isn't something added to awareness. It's something that we need to find within awareness, that is naturally there once we stop ahankering and mamankering, to be a bit Shakespearean about it, make a new verb out of a Pali word. Once we stop that, consciousness is just vast and spacious and open. No resistance, nothing that's blocked out. And and therefore it just sees. Whatever is there is seen. And it's seen not in terms of I and mine, which distorts. When we start to inject ourselves, a self, into the conditioned flow, we arrest it, we distort it, we abstract from it, and therefore we falsify it. But when you relax and you allow awareness to be completely open, everything is as it is, and you see it. In later tradition, this is spoken of as the mirror-like wisdom, the wisdom that sees like a mirror, because whatever you put before the mirror is perfectly reflected in the mirror. Forget about distorting mirrors, but you get the basic analogy. It just shows what's there in front of it. The mirror takes no sides. The mirror doesn't choose what it sees. It just sees what's there, and it sees it as it is. In Buddhist terms, it sees it as conditioned, as arising, but it's arising in dependence on conditions. And as conditions go, it disappears. So it's awareness, once it's freed from ahankar and mamankar, is naturally open and spacious and unlimited. It's naturally wise. It simply sees what is. And it's naturally, let's say, connected. Let's just put it like that at the start. There's no sense of separation. no feeling of difference. So it's loving, to put it bluntly. We're going to come on to this later, but there's no feeling that is dangerous to me, or that I want because it enhances aham, me. So I will take it in as mine, mamang. There's none of that. So everything is viewed impartially, but not an impartiality that's indifferent, impartiality that is warm and loving, and that takes in the joys and the sufferings of all life, and feels a close identification, sort of beyond that. It's solidarity at its ultimate level, a feeling of complete, the term that's used, which is a dangerous one, is oneness with all things, as long as one understands oneness in the sense of the deepest possible solidarity. So in brief, that's what, at least I've come to understand, is what happened to the Buddha under the Bodhi tree. He became freed from conditioned things. He let go of conditioned things because he stopped trying to find I in conditioned things. He stopped trying to find mine in conditioned things. He's able just to relax and open up to what is, and to feel a perfect affinity with everything. Everybody gets some intuition, I think, of all these things, those sort of moments, those wonderful moments when your mind just opens and you just feel unobstructed to anything. Your mind is open to everything. And those moments when, yes, you can see quite plainly. And those moments when you feel at one with everything. For odd reasons, I find that this happens from time to time on the London Underground, which I now think of as a religious experience. But you sort of get on the train and you know, to begin with, you feel sort of jostled and you have to define I as opposed to them. If you just sort of relax, you see all these lives playing out around you, and you can feel at peace with them all, and particularly in London, because it's multicultural character, that's such a rich range of languages and types and so forth. It's absolute delight. So you can, well, I've experienced, and it seems one or two of you also feel this, these sort of moments when you just relax into a sense of closeness to everyone. You imagine that on another level and lasting, and it just the way things now are. So it said the Buddha, after this sudden sort of break, it's presented as a sudden break. I don't know whether it really was. Maybe it's something that had been coming on for him for some time. But at a certain point, it reached another level, and he just found himself free. And it said that he sat for 7 days, motionless, under the Bodhi tree, and the text says, experiencing the bliss of release. Wasn't that wonderful? Just the sense of, let it all go. And it's never coming back. I'm completely free. So he just sat there enjoying that. And then it seems as if in his mind arose a new sort of sense. We're usually presented enlightenment as a single moment. But what we get from the tradition and from various suttas that are placed at the origin, at the time of the Buddha's enlightenment, we get the sense more of a process that he was undergoing. So the second part of that process began to occur. He began to feel a tremendous gratitude, which is expressed in terms of a gratitude to the tree. And it's said that for 7 days, you can tell 7 is a mystical number, and we're going to find there are 7 of these 7 days. 49 days. We're in the realm of myth, but it's myth that's based in experiences that Buddha himself spoke of. But for 7 days, he stood gazing at the Bodhi tree with unwinking eyes. Again, metaphor, I guess. But what this indicates is the Buddha realized his great debt to everything that had supported him, represented by the Bodhi tree that had sheltered him from the burning heat of the sun. Because in May, right now in India, it would be extremely hot. And Bodh Gaya in particular would be very, very hot. It would probably be 46, 47, maybe more. Sometimes in that sort of region it hits 50. Unbearable. I've been there at roughly this time of year, and it can be, I just can't function in that. But the Buddha was there at that time, and the tree was sheltering him from that. He seems to have a very strong affinity for trees, we see often, and a close even relationship with them. So he stood just in gratitude, if you like, thanking the tree. But through the tree, I guess, thanking his old teachers, Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputra, thanking his parents, thanking his foster mother, maybe thanking everybody in all his past lives who'd brought him to this point where he'd been able to just let it all go. It's very important, isn't it, that enlightenment doesn't mean you're now indifferent. An acute awareness of what he owed. Then it's said that he began to sort of pace up and down. If you go to the Mahabodhi temple in Bodh Gaya, all of these are marked out as specific places. They're probably mainly, back readings. Somebody chose that's where it was. Some of them we know go very far back. Others are, I think, just the tourist board grabbing at an opportunity. But anyway, now they've got a kind of an aura to them because people's devotion has been expressed there. Anyway, we do know that the site where he walked up and down is now marked by a series of stone lotuses. The earliest ones go back to the Ashokan period, so quite close to the Buddha, within 150, 200 years of the Buddha's own enlightenment. So he walked up and down, he was sort of thinking, what is it I've experienced? What's the essence of what I've experienced? I'm not going to go into this, but basically he began to work out the process of conditionality, the way in which conditionality works to bind us into the selfhood which leads to our suffering. He began to work it out. It's put in terms of the 12 Nidanas. I suspect that's just a back reading because there are earlier versions of the 12 Nidanas which don't have the full sequence. But what it indicates is that he began to recognize the way in which we're bound up with conditions. Everything is conditioned, and we've identified awareness with those conditions. So he understood the process whereby that happened. Because he's got the sense of release. He's deconditioned himself. Now he's got to work out sort of how to make that intelligible to himself, at the very least, how to sort of think about it. It's said then that he spent a further week sitting in deep meditation, and I won't go too much into all of that because it's not my main focus tonight. But he was, if you like, exploring the full ranges of the universe, because his enlightened mind was now free from a merely human consciousness. Because our consciousness, as we experience it, is bound up with our physical senses. And it's only very occasionally, with great effort in the meditation hall, or if you're lucky to have a greater degree of visionary capacity in spontaneous mystical experience, that we kind of pass beyond the bounds of our human skin, as it were, into a wider experience of the possibilities of reality. But then he came to a fifth place, which is really where I want to focus a bit tonight. And quite a number of important things happened to him there. It's called, the site was called the Ajapala Nigrodha. Nigrodha means banyan, those trees with the long roots that come down from the branches and reroot. They're wonderful trees because they form a kind of house, and they're very, very shady. They're extremely sort of important and popular in Indian village life and in Indian history. A lot happens under a banyan tree. They're favoured places for people meditating because they're so protective. This one was called the goat herds banyan. Aja is a goat, Pala is a protector of goats. So presumably it's a place where the goat herd used to sit while his goats were grazing. Anyway, that's by the way. So the Buddha in the 5th week began sitting there, and it's as if he's been gradually sort of adjusting to the new experience that he's had, this experience of release, deconditioning. And he's beginning to sort of work out what that does for him, what it means. He's sensing his great gratitude, he's working out how to think about what he's experienced. And he's working out what that opens up for him in terms of a conscious experience. The full range of possible conscious experience becomes accessible to him. So in this 5th week, he begins to engage a bit more. The stories tell different sequences, but I'll speak about it like this. So he's sitting there. Up till now, for 4 weeks, maybe for longer, he's had no human encounter. He did encounter Mara, according to the mythic stories. We won't go into that. But he's not encountered another human being. But at this point, he encounters another human being. And it's a Brahmin. Now, I presume everybody knows enough about the Indian social system to know that it's a system of what Dr. Ambedkar famously called of graded inequality, with the Brahmins, so-called priestly caste, right at the top, then the Kshatriyas, the warriors, which is the caste from which the Buddha came, although some argue differently, then the Vaishyas, who are the merchants, the commercial classes, and then the Shudras, who are the workers. Of course, in more recent times, there's developed divisions underneath that. What were called Untouchables and the tribals, now Dalits, come under, though both of those come under that heading because, of course, untouchability is fortunately outlawed in India now, at least in law. And so the Brahmins really sit on top of the whole pile, about 2% of the population, and they still dominate Indian cultural life. I read recently that almost all newspaper editors are Brahmins. Most university professors, many of them, I don't know the percentage, will be Brahmins. They're the educated, the literati who dominate cultural life. And even the time of the Buddha, they were, in the area where the Buddha was, they were trying to establish their dominance. In central and western India, there's an area known as the Aryavata. I won't give you the meanings of all these words, but it was much more under Brahmin dominance. And they were extending their dominance further east into the area where the Buddha, from which the Buddha came and where he was operating. So they've already established quite a bit of dominance. They're trying to sort of promote their particular version of what a human society is. That it is naturally graded, that you are born into a particular caste because of your deeds in a past life. So a whole system for interpretation of society. And this Brahmin sees the Buddha sitting under the Ajapala Nigrodha, the goat herd's banyan. And his name is Huhunkajati, which apparently means the one who makes the noise, hum hum. So you immediately got the idea. He's snooty. He thinks he's the boy. So he goes around with his nose in the air. English class parlance, he's toffee-nosed. He's a bit stuck up. All those sort of expressions. You can sort of map the class system a little bit onto caste, but it's not entirely correspondent. Although I was taught at school the hymn, the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, He made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. We sang that. I can even sing it now, but I won't. So this sort of idea that social order is divinely ordained and that you have to just accept your place in the divine order of things. That was the Brahminical point of view, and it still survives in India, in a much less explicit way usually, and much softened, but still there implicitly in the background. So Huhunkajati, who's absolute classic Brahmin, appears and starts to question the Buddha. And his question is obviously very, very pointed. He said, what makes a Brahmin? How can you tell a Brahmin? What makes you a Brahmin? And the sense you get from, his name for a start, is what he's really saying is, who do you think you are? Kshatriya, who do you think you are? Sitting under a tree. Yeah, you may be, nobility or whatever, but you're not Brahmin. Religion is our business, not yours. So what do you think you're doing there? Doesn't frame it like that, but he frames it in terms of what do you think a Brahmin is? And one guesses, reading between the lines, I hope not illegitimately, his thinking is, well, of course, it's somebody who's born into a particular family. The Buddha, I was going to read you the passage, but I won't, because it's not really quite necessary. I could just give you a sort of paraphrase of what he says. Basically what he says is that, in Dr. Ambedkar paraphrases it, it's worth, not birth, that makes you a Brahmin. So he tries to redefine Brahmin. He tries to take it out of the social hierarchical system and turn it into a spiritual, give it a spiritual meaning. It was doomed, as we later found. It was an early attempt that he made. A lot of the early suttas contain this effort to redefine a Brahmin. It's a bit like, in medieval Britain, sort of saying, what makes you a noble? What makes you a feudal overlord? It's not that your father was one. It's that you are really worthy of it. And you can see, the idea of knighthood, of chivalry, is kind of, you could see, well, no, it's not, you're not a knight because you're born into that. You're a knight because you're really a worthy person. So he says a Brahmin, a true Brahmin, is somebody who does no evil, who is morally good. A true Brahmin is somebody who lives a decent, frugal life, not wasteful. A true Brahmin is somebody who really understands, has studied deeply the nature of things, and has studied with those who know. And he's not arrogant. A Brahmin is somebody who's not arrogant. So he really gives it to Hunkajati. In other words, he's saying, a Brahmin is not you. Hunkajati doesn't seem to realize this. Later, as far as I can piece together, he did become a Brahmin, become a bhikshu, but the other bhikshus found him a bit difficult because he was so snooty. And the Buddha, rather interestingly, said, look, he can't help it. He's been a Brahmin for 7 lifetimes, and it's just ingrained, which in the popular parlance of the time is just privilege, isn't it? He's got Brahmin privilege. He's just become completely identified with his Brahminical status, and he thinks it's him. Because if you're born on the right side of the tracks, as it were, you think it's your own achievement. I was born not very far on the right side of the tracks, but somewhere on the right side of the tracks. And, for a long time, I thought that was me. Nothing to do with me. It's a complete accident of history. Could have been very different. As far as I know, no virtue of mine brought me there. But you identify with it. That's what happens in a hierarchical society. And all societies are hierarchical to some degree. Got much more fluidity than perhaps there's ever been. But there's still hierarchies implicit. Class still there in the background. It's not nearly as much as it was when I was growing up, which was really strong, a sense of the difference between up and down, really strong. But it's mellowed considerably, but it's still a factor in British life. It's puzzling to those of you who are not born in Britain, I know, but it's still there. And you may encounter it, if you're not British, as something really rather bewildering. You encounter boundaries and barriers you don't really quite understand, but every English person knows. So the Buddha's first human interaction was a complete rejection of social hierarchy, and an assertion of moral value and spiritual value over worldly value, over wealth, over birth, over power, etc. It's really, really significant, isn't it? It's almost shocking that was the enlightened mind coming from that enormous freedom, coming with that enormous freedom, that complete freedom from identification. Yeah, he's a kshatriya, but he's no longer a kshatriya. He stopped identifying with that. And so when he encounters the class system, the caste system, he just sees it, and he is not taken in by it. And I should say that really for the rest of his life, he just kept on and on and on attacking the caste system. It's a very interesting incident, not long after his enlightenment. And once the order had started, he went back to his hometown, and a lot of his own relations and others began to become bhikshus and bhikshunis. And a group of his cousins, male cousins, decided to become bhikshus, and they're Barber. And Barbers are low caste. They're not the lowest caste, but they're low caste because they're dealing with human waste in a way, and they also do bloodletting. So in the thinking of the caste system, they're low. So Upali, the Barber, also said, well, I want to go forth too. So the stories differ. In one story, which comes from more Sanskrit sources, the Buddha told the others, I'm going to ordain Upali first. Because in the Bhikshu Sangha, priority is given to order of ordination. So the ones who are ordained first have to be mildly deferred to by those who come after. So that's the way he solved the problem, if you see what I mean. So Upali was ordained first, and then the others followed. And of course, that meant that Upali was always in the order, had sort of honorific priority. In the end, you know, when they're in their chapter meeting, they're all equal. But there's a sort of honor of position. He'd be given the best seat, and so forth. So the Buddha, it wasn't just he rejected the caste system. It was affirmative action, if you like. He deliberately undid it. He spoke of the order, the Sangha, as being like the ocean. So when all the rivers of India, the Jamna, the Ganga, the Krishna, etc., when they come into the mighty ocean, they lose their separate names and identities and just become the mighty ocean. So in the same way, when the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, etc., join the order, they lose their designation as members of a particular caste. They just become, well, in the terms of that sutta, sons of the Shakyan, daughters of the Shakyan. That's extremely significant. The Buddha's enlightenment inevitably, by its very definition, put him into immediate conflict with or not conflict, but it meant that he immediately rejected the social hierarchy based on values that were completely foreign, or ideas, let's say, that were completely foreign to reality. It's deeply, deeply significant that the Buddha, first encounter is a rejection of the social order. And we should pause to think. Social hierarchy, social distinction is everywhere. There's class, caste, race, whatever. You can put so many different factors in that divide us. And if we are truly practicing the Dhamma, we will go beyond those. We will let them go. We will leave them behind. And not only will we just leave them behind, we will reject them and we will work to go beyond them. And that means, first of all, you have to get rid of ahankar to some degree. And part of what you're clinging to as I and as mine is your social status, on whichever side of the tracks you find yourself. Your social status is part of what you have to let go of. You know, I can never stop being a white Englishman from a basically middle-class background with a certain education and so forth. I can't stop that. It wasn't my choice. I didn't choose it. But I can't stop it being a fact about me. But I can stop identifying with it and identifying with the privileges it gives me, such as they are. There are much more privileged, but there are privileges that go with it. So I have to recognize those and say, these are not me. They're not mine. I didn't achieve these. They're not something for me to be proud of. They're not something for me to operate from. I try to use them to my benefit. So, for instance, recently to try and get help to my brothers and sisters in India, I used my old public school boy network. I've never used it before, but I sent a message to the Old Boys Society and asked, can anybody help me get oxygen concentrators to India? Answer came, there none so far. But you know what, those are the sort of people who have influence. So if I'm going to use them shamelessly if I can. But, you know, beyond that, it's not me. It's not mine. And I should be recognizing that this is adventitious. It's something added on to who I am. And, you know, the identities that are given to people, bad identities that people are given in society, they're not really, that's not who they are. And I'm not going to relate to them. That should be our aspiration. I'm going to relate to them as individuals beyond whatever is there. But at the same time, we need to recognize that those are there, as the Buddha did. He directly confronted these issues and worked them out. He's pretty tough with Brahmins. You foolish, ignorant person. Just because your father was a Brahmin and your father's father was a Brahmin, how do you know whether he was really your father? He used to really tease them like crazy. How do you know that your mother didn't stray? Which, of course, they found deeply insulting. But generally, they kind of, yeah, you're right, yeah. But he was vigorously trying to deal with the social hierarchy that was thickening around him, and did so in the most full-hearted, full-blooded, vociferous way. But there's only one side of it. There's this analysis that he has, which comes from his wisdom perspective, if you like. There's another side of it. It doesn't come out so much in the Enlightenment story, although it's implied. And perhaps it comes out a little bit in what then happened after Huhunkajati had gone away, saying, so much for that. He begins to think, how can I help? How can I respond to the needs of the world? How can I respond to suffering? Now, that's pretty significant, isn't it? That he wants to do that. Not just he wants to do it, he knows he must. It's sort of his very nature that he must help. And he's a bit confounded to begin with, because he thinks, what I've seen, cost me so much struggle, and people are so much entangled in ahankar and mamankar. How can they possibly see what I've seen? And so he's thinking, I'm not going to bother. It's not worth the effort. I'll just I'll just expend a lot of, I can't say you get fed up because he's the Buddha, but it would be a lot of energy expended to no result. But what I want to, then he comes, of course, to realize that people are in different states, and there's some who are a little bit open, and he can teach them. And then there are others a little less open, but then they can join in this great wave of opening that we are participating in now because the Buddha responded. But I want to dwell a bit more on that responsiveness, because that's the other very significant thing. The fact that he completely rejected the caste system and implicitly, therefore, all social hierarchy and division is only one side of what happened, or it's one part of a whole. Why did he feel he needed to teach? Why did he feel he wanted to communicate the way to attain the freedom and bliss that he had come to experience? Well, because of metta, because of Maitri, because it's implicit in awareness itself. If we're really able to be aware without clinging, awareness is naturally loving, to put it that way. Awareness is naturally connecting. Awareness naturally feels affinity, empathy, identity, solidarity, all these sorts of words, which are just faint echoes of what the Buddha felt. So implicit in the Buddha's desire to teach was his metta, his reaching out to others, and which was part of what he was, part of his enlightenment, was a natural reaching out to others, a natural desire to communicate the liberating message that he had. And this is extremely important. It's hard for us to realize this, how radical this was. The word Maitri which is the Sanskrit version of metta, is found in other, what we now call Hindu texts or Vedic texts, a little bit around the time of the Buddha. It's very unclear whether these post-date or predate the Buddha. A lot of scholars think they're actually influenced by Buddhism. But be that as it may, it's very clear for the first time, Maitri, karuna, compassion, love and compassion were made central in a religion in India. Maybe in the whole world, I haven't thought about that. But maybe for the very first time, the idea of impartial, absolutely open and free metta was introduced by the Buddha for the very first time. No other teacher based his teaching around metta, around karuna. I learned this from listening to a lecture by Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's a very good modern scholar and translator of the Pali Canon. And he affirmed this fact, and I did a little bit of research independently of that. And it really does seem that the Buddha's message was radical in that way. It's a little bit more, we're a bit more accustomed to it because it's a part of Christianity, for instance, and Islam in some ways. But in Buddhism, it's utterly central that awareness itself, when we truly liberate it from conditions, from being wrapped up with conditions, is full of metta. So the Buddha, at the same time as directly rejecting the social hierarchy, and we can take it that he meant by, talking about caste, we meant everyone, race, gender, whatever. He rejected all hierarchy, and bluntly, flatly, vigorously, and actively. But he did that because he saw that that stands in the way of true human solidarity. It stands in the way of what human beings can really be for each other. It stands in the way of Maitri. True human community is one in which we have Maitri for each other. We participate in Maitri. Maitri being, I haven't defined it, but it's love is a brief way of putting it. Loving kindness, it's usually put, but it's this impartial sense of well-wishing. Impartial in the sense, no interest from your side. It's just you wish well for this or that human being or those human beings or those living beings just because they're alive, just because they can suffer. You want well for them. And it's of the nature of the enlightened consciousness, not added to it. So the Buddha is in refuting the caste system, therefore refuting all social hierarchy, is is asserting metta, Maitri, and saying that our true relationship with each other is one of love, of loving kindness, of mutual appreciation, of taking pleasure in each other, enjoyment of each other, and helping each other. That's the true nature of human society. So at the Enlightenment, of course, he went on then to further stages of the unfolding of his understanding, which eventuated in him going to Sarnath and teaching, beginning his teaching career, and then for the rest of his career, unfolding that message more and more eloquently, articulately, and vigorously. Extraordinary vigor he had, even as a very old man, just going, walking to where people were and communicating. But when we come right back to the origins, the Buddha's first confrontation with human beings is with the social hierarchy. And he just rejects it and asserts spiritual and moral values over the hierarchies of birth, accident, wealth, etc. And he does it in the name, if you like, of true love, of true human solidarity, of our true appreciation of each other, a true sense of deep empathy with each other, which naturally flowers as we begin to become free from our self-attachment. So when we're celebrating the Buddha's enlightenment, there's so many different aspects of it that we could celebrate. But at the moment, I personally feel, and particularly because of the events of the last year, that it's very important that we recognize that this message of rejection on the one hand of social hierarchy in all its forms, all its evil forms, and on the other hand, of assertion of true human solidarity. That is what the Buddha bequeathed us, and what is our duty as descendants of the Buddha to take forward, to embody amongst us, so that, there will be social and pre-arranged hierarchies amongst us. We come in with certain positions in the world, all of us, and which have their place in a hierarchy that exists around in the world. It's much more complex and muted, and it's experienced differently by different people in a country like Britain today. But it's still there, still very much there. And it's our duty as we come into the Sangha to begin to disseparate ourselves from that identification, which means we need to, all of us, interrogate that so that we begin to recognize, oh, I am like that. I am male. I am white. I am middle class. I've had a privileged education. The doors have opened for me. But that's not my achievement. I'm glad it happened, but it's not my achievement. And insofar as it is a good thing, I should use it. Use it for in the name of Maitri, in the name of metta. And everyone has their own version of that. I've heard many stories this week and over this last year, what's happened this time a year ago or whatever, has sort of opened up this topic. In some ways, it's, some people have got polarized by it, but I think essentially what it does is gives us the opportunity to follow the Buddha and to recognize in ourselves whatever our position is. And when you're in the more privileged position, it's harder to see. As growing up white in Britain, I never thought of myself as white. I'm just British. See where that goes. It's okay to be white, it's not a problem, but if I identify with what that brings me, then it's a problem. A problem for me and a problem for others. And so if we're really going to follow the Buddha, we should do what the Buddha says. He says that all the rivers lose their separate identities when they go into the mighty ocean. In the same way, all the different people coming from all the different castes lose their caste identity when they enter the Sangha. Doesn't mean you stop being somebody from a Kshatriya background or Brahmin background, but you stop identifying with that and relating to others on that basis. And you simply see yourself as a human being with other human beings, with that, which you can be okay about. It's okay. It's not a problem. But it's only a problem if you identify with it and use it, as it were, in the struggle to gain dominance and advantage. So I think that moment when the Buddha met Huankajati rings down the ages. Dr. Ambedkar, the great leader who came from a Dalit background himself, said that the Buddha launched a revolution, what he later called a Dhamma revolution. And what he meant by that was just this, that he launched a revolution that overturned the fixity of the social hierarchy and that promoted the sense of common humanity and a sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, fraternity in his term, bandhutva in Hindi, brotherhood in sisterhood. Well, I don't know what we say nowadays, but siblinghood, the sense of being part of the same family, same human family. And that was the Buddha's revolution. But then he said there was a counter-revolution. The counter-revolution is still going on, which turned it all back and brought back, re-solidified the social hierarchy. And it's still solid to this day. And it even invades the Buddhist movement in India, because that's the problem. If we don't actually tackle this within ourselves, it starts to come into our Buddhist world. So that in Maharashtra, where Dr. Ambedkar came from and where most of his followers come from, they came from the same caste as he did, because there are many different Dalit castes. They mostly came from that same caste. And many castes have subcastes, which are to do with endogamy, who you marry, exogamy. You have to marry from a different subcaste and complicated rules like that. But anyway, what's developed in some parts of Maharashtra are subcaste viharas. Do you see? So that we've entered the Sangha to get beyond all these divisions, but then we start arranging the Sangha on the basis of those divisions. So that in Sri Lanka, it has a caste system, but not nearly as strongly enforced, and I think a little bit more fluid, there are sections of the Sangha. The Sangha is divided into a number of what are called nikayas, mutually exclusive chapters. And there are nikayas that are for those from a particular caste, Sri Lankan caste. So do you see what I mean? The Buddha's voice from 2,000, whatever it is, years ago, 700 years ago, 2,500 and something years ago, has been forgotten. His message to Huankajati has been forgotten. And why that happens is because one does not take responsibility for what one is just given by the lottery of birth, the lottery of which section of society you're born into. And we can't change that. We can accept it. We don't have to feel ashamed about it. In fact, some people need to feel prouder of their identity because it's one that's been looked down upon. And that's completely understandable. It's a form of self-metta. But we all have to take responsibility for what the hand that life has dealt us, and not identify with it, not make it part of our ahankar and mamankar. And if we can do that, then we will create amongst us a true Sangha, which is based on fraternity, where we're just here as human beings who have our different histories, but we meet each other simply as fellow sons and daughters of the Shakyan, sons and daughters of the Buddha, and who are thereby forming a model for society as a whole. We're forming a model of what it could be if we all manage to just accept what we are and accept how that works in the social system from which we've come, and to not allow ourselves to identify with it. That's the Buddha's message, and I think it's an extremely important one. Of course, what we must never forget, it's ultimately predicated upon his enlightenment. It's predicated upon his release, his becoming released from the deepest possible identification. He's completely let go of any idea of I or mine. He just doesn't think like that anymore. So in order, perhaps, to achieve this sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, well, we need to be letting go increasingly of ahankar and mamanka, and thereby, yes, creating the true Sangha, the Arya Sangha. So I hope these words are useful and that they help us to focus on what the social revolution that the Buddha generated and to see what its real significance is, and especially to recognize that it's rooted in Maitri, in loving kindness. Thank you very much.
So yes, just for me to say thank you very much, Subhuti, for giving a talk that no one else could have given, and I mean that in bringing your experience, practice, your engagement with social issues over many, many decades. So thank you once again from everyone here.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to hand over to Amala Yoda now.
Thanks, Kusatara. Thank you for that, and thank you, Subhuti. I've had the pleasure of helping to organise Subhuti's
Cram my programme
over the last week, and I can say he's followed an extremely impressive schedule. Pretty much wall-to-wall meetings. I don't think there's been so much time to breathe, but. Subhuti done it with so much energy and so much sort of engagement and goodwill and enthusiasm. It's just been a real, just so impressive to see and a real inspiration. So thank you, Subhuti. And of course, so much of that has been reaching out to us here in classes and those at home as well. And so, and I think Subhuti really practices what he preaches in this regard as well, in terms of reaching out to those who don't have access to the Dharma, who are on the margins of society, and so much of his work each year is doing that. You've heard him speak about his work with the most marginalised sections of Indian society. He also does this with the Roma Gypsies in Hungary, and really, really commits himself to practicing what he preaches in that regard and reaching out to those who don't have the Buddha's message. So what we'd like to do here is really to support Subhuti in that. So what we'll do is we're just going to do a bit of a fundraiser for Subhuti. So really to just ask you that if you possibly can at all, what would really help with that work in reaching out to those who don't have the Buddha's message and bringing them into the Sangha. Connecting on the basis of brotherhood and sisterhood, and helping to raise people up. If you can help with that, a donation would really, really be useful. Really, really useful, and we can give that to Subhuti, and Subhuti can use that for his work in Hungary and in India, but of course here in the UK as well. So Sanjay, our tech person, will put up the donation link now. So if you can contribute to that, that would be absolutely fantastic. However large or small, but how about if we were to say £30? £30 would go a huge way in helping Subhuti to do that. So that would be really fantastic. Of course, we really appreciate any amount whatsoever, but how about £30? Yes, for those of us here as well, maybe we'll have a Dana bowl. Somebody will hold a Dana bowl just outside, and for those of us here as well, anything that you can contribute, hugely appreciated. So thanks so much, and thank you to Subhuti again. Yeah, thank you.
realise we haven't worked out how to finish this. So I think this is me saying thank you very much for coming, and thanks again to Subhuti. And I hope you can join us for the rest of the Buddha Day session, which is back online for our mitra ceremonies, this affirmation, these commitments to the three jewels, to the Buddhist life, within the context of a sevenfold puja, so a big ritual finishing today's celebrations. Okay.
On the same link.
Sorry?
On the same Zoom link.
On the same Zoom link as the one you've been following. So thanks everyone for coming online, and thanks everyone for coming into the Buddhist Centre. And we'll make our way